The soft glow of the hotel suite felt dreamlike as I lost myself in his arms. Every touch from Daniel was electric, making me forget who I was supposed to be celebrating with that night. The champagne bubbles still tingled on my tongue as his lips pressed against mine. I had told James I needed to finalize details for our surprise anniversary dinner, but the only surprise I had planned was this stolen afternoon with the man who had become my escape. "We should have more time," I whispered, glancing at the antique clock on the nightstand. It was 3 p.m. "James thinks I'm tied up with clients until 6. Daniel smiled, tracing his finger along my collarbone. The perks of being married to a workaholic wedding planner. He never questions when you're running late. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent the past 12 years helping couples celebrate their perfect love stories, while my own had faded into comfortable routine. James and I had been married for 12 years, and somewhere along the way, the passion had been replaced by predictability. Daniel was a photographer I often worked with on wedding shoots. He was spontaneous, passionate, everything James wasn't anymore. "I booked this room until 5, I said, snuggling closer to him. "Then I need to get ready for the anniversary dinner James is surprising me with." Daniel laughed. "Some surprise. You planned the whole thing." "Well, he thinks he surprised me by having me plan my own surprise party. The restaurant downstairs has no idea I know about the reservation." The room at the Riverstone Hotel held special meaning. It was where James and I had spent our wedding night 12 years ago. Using it for my affair gave me a twisted thrill that I didn't want to examine too closely. We were so absorbed in each other that we didn't hear the first knock. The second one was louder, more insistent. "Housekeeping," called a muffled voice. I froze. I put the "Do Not Disturb" sign out. "Just ignore it," Daniel murmured against my neck. The third knock came with the sound of a key card sliding into the lock. I scrambled to pull the sheet around me as the door swung open. But it wasn't housekeeping. James stood in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled fury. His dark eyes, normally warm when they looked at me, were cold and unreadable. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be at his office until 5, then meeting me at the restaurant at 7. "James," I gasped, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What are you doing here?" he finished, his voice unnervingly calm as he stepped into the room. "I came to surprise my wife on our anniversary. Looks like I succeeded." Daniel was already gathering his clothes from the floor, his face flushed with panic. James didn't even look at him. "Room 423, James said quietly. "The same room where we spent our wedding night." "That was thoughtful of you, Melissa." My mind raced for explanations, excuses, anything to say, but nothing came. The carefully constructed double life I had built over the past 11 months collapsed in seconds. "James, please, this isn't—" I began, but he cut me off with a raised hand. "Save it," he said. His composure terrified me more than any shouting could have. I just needed to confirm what I already knew. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Don't bother coming to the restaurant tonight. The reservation's been changed." The door clicked shut behind him with devastating finality. Daniel was already dressed, gathering his things with shaking hands. "Melissa, I'm sorry, but I need to go." "You can't just leave me here," I pleaded, still clutching the sheet around me. "I think your husband just did," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "And I'm doing the same." As Daniel slipped out the door, I sat alone in the rumpled sheets, my perfect life unraveling thread by thread. The anniversary dinner James had planned was in 4 hours. Our daughter was supposed to be there. Our friends, my parents. And now everyone would know. What I didn't realize then was that walking in on us was just the beginning of James's plan. He had spent months gathering evidence, tracking my lies, preparing for this moment. The real devastation was yet to come. My life before that fateful day had been a masterclass in deception, though I preferred to think of it as compartmentalization. I was Melissa Thornton, one of Portland's most sought-after wedding planners, known for my meticulous attention to detail and flawless execution. Clients trusted me with their perfect day because I projected an image of perfection in my own life. James and I met in college. He was studying finance while I pursued event management. We were the couple everyone envied, attractive, ambitious, seemingly perfect for each other. After graduation, we built our lives methodically, careers first, then marriage, then a home in the right neighborhood, and finally Olivia, our beautiful daughter. From the outside, we had it all. James rose through the ranks at his financial firm, eventually specializing in digital forensics for high-profile clients. I built my wedding planning business from scratch, developing a reputation for creating magazine-worthy celebrations. Our social media profiles showcased a curated highlight reel, family vacations, date nights, Olivia's dance recitals. What those perfect images didn't show was the growing distance between us. James worked late, often bringing his analytical mindset home, approaching our marriage like another problem to solve. I buried myself in creating perfect weddings for strangers, secretly resenting that my own marriage had become a beautiful shell with little substance inside. Daniel entered my life at a vulnerable moment. We worked together on a luxury wedding, and after the successful event, our celebratory drinks turned into something more. What began as a one-time indiscretion became a regular escape. "You know what I love about you?" Daniel asked me once as we lay in another hotel room. "You plan everything down to the minute for your clients, but when you're with me, you let go of all that control." It was true. With James, I felt the constant pressure to maintain our perfect image. With Daniel, I could be impulsive, even reckless. I became an expert at creating alibis. My profession provided the perfect cover: client meetings, venue visits, vendor consultations. I kept a separate calendar hidden in a password-protected app on my phone. I deleted texts immediately after reading them. I had a change of clothes in my car and perfume to mask any lingering scents. "I have to meet with the florist for the Miller wedding," I told James one evening, when I was actually meeting Daniel. "Again? Didn't you just meet with them yesterday?" James asked, barely looking up from his laptop. "Different florist. The first one couldn't accommodate all their requests." The lie came easily, practiced. James nodded, trusting me completely. At least, that's what I thought. "Don't work too hard," he said. The guilt was there, buried deep, but I rationalized it away. James and I were more like business partners than lovers these days. We co-parented efficiently. We maintained our social obligations. But the passion was gone, and I convinced myself I deserved more. I never planned to leave James. Daniel knew this and accepted it. Our arrangement satisfied a need without requiring the messy complications of divorce, custody arrangements, and social fallout. If you're thinking about having an affair, remember this: it's easy to believe you're smarter than everyone else, that your deceptions are too clever to be discovered, that your separate worlds will never collide. If you've ever been tempted to create a double life like I did, let my story be your warning. The house of cards I built was impressive in its complexity, but like all such structures, it was destined to fall. And when it did, it destroyed everything in its path. I never suspected James was onto me. His working hours seemed predictable, his questions about my schedule casual. If anything, I thought he was too absorbed in his own work to notice the subtle changes in mine. What I didn't know was that James had begun to notice inconsistencies months earlier. A receipt from a restaurant I claimed not to have visited. A text message notification from Daniel that appeared briefly when my phone was charging. The growing frequency of emergency client situations that pulled me away on evenings and weekends. James, with his background in financial forensics, approached his suspicions methodically. He didn't confront me with half-formed accusations. He gathered data, built a case, waited for irrefutable evidence. All while I believed my deception was perfect. Looking back, I'm still amazed at how confident I was. Subscribe to my channel for more stories of how seemingly perfect lives can unravel in an instant. The months before James caught me were filled with a dangerous sense of invincibility. Each successful lie, each unquestioned absence, reinforced my belief that I had mastered the art of deception. There was the weekend in March when I told James I had a wedding expo in Seattle. Instead, Daniel and I spent 2 days at a coastal bed and breakfast. I even called James from the beach, describing the non-existent expo in detail while watching the waves crash against the shore. "How's the expo going?" James asked during our call. "Exhausting," I replied, winking at Daniel as he poured us wine on our private deck. "So many vendors to meet with. I've got meetings scheduled back-to-back tomorrow, too." "Well, don't work too hard. Olivia and I are doing fine, but she misses you." A twinge of guilt hit me at the mention of our daughter, but I pushed it aside. "Give her a kiss for me. I'll bring her back something special." After hanging up, Daniel raised his glass. "To your amazing ability to live 2 lives at once." I clinked my glass against his. It's no different from what I do for clients every day, managing timelines, coordinating moving parts, anticipating problems before they arise. My wedding planning skills translated perfectly to managing my affair. I kept detailed mental notes of what I told James versus the truth, creating a complex web of lies that never contradicted each other. I had fake email trails with non-existent clients. I even created a separate credit card for expenses related to Daniel, ensuring they never appeared on joint statements. One close call came in May when James surprised me at my office with lunch. I had told him I'd be there all day, but I'd actually planned to meet Daniel nearby. I barely had time to text Daniel to cancel before James walked in. "Thought you could use a break," James said, holding up a bag from my favorite sandwich shop. "That's so thoughtful," I replied, heart still racing from the near miss. I was just about to call for delivery. He smiled, setting out the food on my desk. "How's the Henderson wedding coming along?" I launched into details about the wedding I was planning, relieved that at least this wasn't a lie. As we ate, I noticed James glancing around my office, taking in the calendar on my wall, the files on my desk. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now I wonder if he was already gathering information, comparing what he saw with what I had told him. The most reckless I became was in June, when I convinced James that a client needed me to accompany them on a last-minute venue tour in wine country. In reality, Daniel and I spent the day visiting wineries, taking photos that I was careful to keep off social media. "What if someone sees us?" Daniel asked as we walked hand in hand through a vineyard. I laughed, feeling invincible in the warm summer air. "No one we know comes to these small wineries. Besides, if anyone did see us, I'd just say you were a photography vendor I was scouting for a client." I had an answer for everything, a contingency for every possible exposure. Or so I thought. What I didn't realize was that James had already installed tracking software on my phone by then. He knew exactly where I had gone that day, and it wasn't to the venue I had mentioned. He was building his case, piece by piece, while I basked in the false security of my perfectly constructed lies. My professional reputation added another layer of protection. Who would suspect that someone who specialized in creating perfect weddings would be undermining her own marriage? I used my knowledge of relationships and celebrations to create a facade so convincing that even our closest friends were fooled. "You and James are such an inspiration," my friend Rachel told me at a dinner party in July. 12 years, and you still seem so connected." I smiled, accepting the compliment while James squeezed my hand under the table. "It takes work," I said, the irony of my statement lost on everyone but me. That night, James and I made love for the first time in weeks. I felt a momentary reconnection, a flicker of what we once had. For a brief moment, I considered ending things with Daniel, recommitting to my marriage. But the next day, James was once again absorbed in work, and the moment passed. By August, I had grown so comfortable with my double life that I took bigger risks. Daniel and I began meeting at a small apartment he rented rather than hotels. I kept a set of clothes there, along with makeup and toiletries. I started seeing him during lunch breaks, rushing back to work with barely enough time to compose myself. My confidence grew with each successful deception. I began to believe that I had created the perfect arrangement. The stability and social standing of my marriage combined with the passion and excitement of my affair. I convinced myself that as long as James never found out, no one was getting hurt. What I failed to consider was that James was far more perceptive than I gave him credit for. His quiet demeanor didn't indicate obliviousness. It masked a mind that was constantly observing, analyzing, connecting dots. While I thought I was winning at a game of deception, he was playing a longer, more strategic game of his own. What I didn't know during those months of illusory security was that James had been connecting the signals of my infidelity with the precision of the financial analyst he was. The first red flag for him came when our cell phone bill showed a pattern of calls and texts to the same number, always deleted from my call history. James later told me he had first become suspicious in March after finding a receipt in my purse from a restaurant in Cannon Beach, when I was supposedly at a wedding expo in Seattle. He didn't confront me then. Instead, he began quietly monitoring discrepancies between what I said and what the evidence showed. By May, his suspicions had grown strong enough that he consulted with a colleague who specialized in digital investigation. With technical help, he gained access to my deleted text messages, hundreds of exchanges with Daniel planning our meetings, discussing our encounters, arranging our next rendezvous. One text I had sent to Daniel in June read, "Jay thinks I'm at the Henderson venue tour until 8 tonight. Meet me at your place at 4? Daniel's response, "Already chilling champagne. Wear that black thing I like." James showed me these recovered messages months later, his voice steady as he described how each discovery felt like a physical blow. In July, James took his investigation further. He placed a small GPS tracker in my car, confirming that my trips rarely matched my stated destinations. He set up cameras in our home office, capturing me making calls to Daniel when I thought I was alone. He even hired a private investigator who photographed Daniel and me entering and leaving hotels together. All this time, I remained oblivious, convinced of my own cleverness. There were signs that James was acting differently. He asked more questions about my schedule, suggested joining me for client meetings I had fabricated, offered to pick me up from places I wasn't actually at, but I attributed these changes to a renewed interest in our marriage rather than growing suspicion. The first concrete piece of evidence James confronted me with came in late August. I had told him I was meeting with a florist, but my credit card statement showed a charge at a lingerie store at the exact same time. "How was the florist meeting?" he asked casually over dinner. "Productive," I replied, launching into details about flower arrangements I had researched online, but never actually discussed with any vendor. "I think we've finally sorted the centerpieces for the right wedding." James nodded, taking a sip of wine. "That's good. By the way, there was a charge on the credit card from La Pearl Boutique this afternoon. I thought you might have lost your card." My heart stuttered, but I recovered quickly. "Oh, I stopped there after the meeting. Thought I'd pick up something nice for our anniversary next month." "That's thoughtful," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "I look forward to seeing it." That night, I went through my hidden purchases, selecting a black negligee I hadn't worn for Daniel yet. I presented it to James as if it had been bought that day, and he accepted it without comment. I thought I had successfully navigated the close call, unaware that he had added another piece to his growing collection of evidence. By September, James had assembled a damning timeline of my activities over the previous 6 months. He knew about Daniel, his name, where he lived, how often we met. He had accessed my secret email account where Daniel and I sometimes communicated. He had even followed us once, watching from a distance as we dined at a restaurant where I was supposedly meeting a caterer. What James was doing wasn't just gathering evidence. He was building a case so thorough, so undeniable, that I would have no possibility of explaining it away. And he was planning something beyond simple exposure. In early October, he suggested we celebrate our upcoming anniversary with a special dinner at the Riverstone Hotel, the place where we had our wedding reception, the place where we spent our wedding night in room 423, the same room where he would later catch me with Daniel. We should do something meaningful this year. he said one evening as we sat in our living room, me working on wedding details, him seemingly focused on financial reports. 12 years is significant. That sounds lovely, I replied, touched by his sentimentality while simultaneously texting Daniel under the table. Do you want me to make the arrangements? Actually, I'd like to handle it, James said. You're always planning everything. Let me surprise you for once. I agreed, never suspecting that his surprise would be entirely different from what I imagined. In a cruel twist of fate, I even booked room 423 for my meetup with Daniel that afternoon, thinking it added an exciting element of risk to meet my lover in the same room where I had begun my marriage. As our anniversary approached, James became unusually attentive. He asked about my schedule for that day, confirmed that I would be free for dinner, even suggested I wear the red dress I had worn on our 10th anniversary. All the while, he was finalizing his plan for exposure. Will your parents be able to join us for the dinner? He asked casually one morning. Your parents are coming? I asked, surprised. I thought it was just going to be us. I thought it might be nice to have family there, he said. It's been a while since we've all gotten together. I've already invited them, along with a few close friends. This should have been my warning. James was ensuring an audience for what was to come, but I was too deep in my deception to see the signs. I even felt a twinge of annoyance that my special day with James would now include others, completely missing the irony that I had already planned to spend part of that special day with Daniel. The pieces were all in place. James had his evidence, his plan, and soon he would have his moment of revelation. All while I continued to believe I was in control, that my secret world would remain hidden, that I could continue indefinitely enjoying the benefits of both my marriage and my affair. The day before our anniversary, James kissed me goodbye with unusual intensity before leaving for work. I can't wait for tomorrow, he said, holding my gaze. Me too, I replied, already planning my afternoon with Daniel before our anniversary dinner. If only I had recognized the cold determination behind his eyes. If only I had realized that his patience had finally run out. If only I had known that my carefully constructed double life was hours away from spectacular public destruction. After James caught Daniel and me in room 423, I spent the next 3 hours in a daze of panic. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and family asking about the anniversary dinner. I ignored them all, frantically trying to reach James, who wasn't answering his phone. Eventually, I gathered the courage to go home, hoping to speak with him before he told anyone else about what he had discovered. Our house was empty. James had taken Olivia to his parents' house, a fact I learned from a terse text he finally sent. Olivia is with my parents for the weekend. I'll see you at Riverstone at 7 as planned. I was confused. Was he still expecting me to come to the anniversary dinner after what had happened? It seemed impossible. Yet his message was clear. Perhaps he wanted to discuss things privately before telling our family and friends. Maybe there was still a chance to salvage something from this disaster. I spent the next 2 hours getting ready in a state of emotional turmoil. I chose the red dress he had suggested, applied my makeup carefully to hide the evidence of tears, and drove to the Riverstone Hotel with my heart pounding in my chest. The private dining room was already full when I arrived. Our parents were there, along with 8 of our closest friends. James stood at the head of the table, talking quietly with the event manager. He looked up when I entered, his face unreadable. "Melissa," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "I'm glad you could join us." Everyone turned to look at me. I forced a smile, noticing the strange tension in the air. Did they all know already? Had James told them while I was frantically trying to reach him? "Sorry I'm late," I said, moving toward the empty seat beside James. There was traffic. He pulled out my chair with exaggerated courtesy. "No need to apologize. We're used to your unpredictability these days." A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the table. My mother smiled encouragingly at me, but my father avoided my eyes. James's parents were looking at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Pity? Disgust? It was impossible to tell. "I was just about to make a toast," James said, raising his glass, "to 12 years of marriage." Everyone lifted their glasses hesitantly. 12 years, James continued, his eyes fixed on me. A lot can happen in 12 years. When Melissa and I stood at the altar in this very hotel, we promised to love and cherish each other, to be faithful, to honor our vows. My stomach clenched. This wasn't going to be the private discussion I had hoped for. For those of you who don't know, this afternoon I found Melissa in room 423, the same room where we spent our wedding night, with another man. Gasps and murmurs erupted around the table. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My best friend Rachel stared at me in shock. "James, please," I whispered, reaching for his arm. "Not like this." He moved away from my touch. "I think we're past privacy now, Melissa. After all, you've been sharing our marriage with Daniel Phillips for nearly a year." The sound of Daniel's name spoken aloud in front of our family and friends made it all horrifyingly real. I felt the heat of shame rising in my face as every eye in the room turned to me. "That's not fair," I stammered, though even I knew how hollow those words sounded. "Fair?" James's voice remained controlled, which somehow made it worse than if he had shouted. "Let's talk about fair, Melissa." He nodded to one of our friends, Ryan, who stood and connected a laptop to the projector at the end of the room. My confusion lasted only seconds before understanding dawned with sickening clarity. The screen lit up with a timeline labeled, "Melissa's Year of Deception." It began with texts between Daniel and me from 11 months ago, continued with hotel receipts, GPS locations showing my car at Daniel's apartment, side-by-side comparisons of where I said I was versus where credit card charges placed me. James narrated each piece of evidence with the detached precision of the financial analyst he was. March 15th, Melissa told me she was at a wedding expo in Seattle. Her credit card shows charges at coastal restaurants 200 miles away. April 12th, Melissa said she was meeting the Bennett wedding party. She was actually at the Lakeside Hotel with Daniel from 2 until 5 in the afternoon. On and on it went, a methodical dismantling of every lie I had told. Some of our friends couldn't look at me. Others couldn't look away. My father had his head in his hands. James's mother was quietly crying. "If you're wondering how I could be so calm about this," James continued, "it's because I've had months to process it." While Melissa thought she was cleverly managing 2 separate lives, I was documenting every inconsistency, every lie, every betrayal. The timeline on screen shifted to photos, pictures of Daniel and me entering hotels, sitting together in restaurants, walking hand in hand through a vineyard. The private investigator had been thorough. "James, enough," my father finally said. "We get the point." "Do we?" James asked. "Because I'm not sure Melissa does. I'm not sure she understands what it's like to have the person you trust most in the world lie to your face day after day." I sat frozen in my chair, unable to defend myself, unable even to cry. The evidence was overwhelming, indisputable. If you're watching this and have ever been caught in a lie, imagine that moment of exposure multiplied by 100, witnessed by everyone who matters in your life. "The most painful part wasn't the affair itself," James said, his voice finally betraying emotion. "It was watching you become someone who could lie so easily, so completely, without a flicker of remorse. Each night you came home from being with him and kissed our daughter goodnight with the same mouth that had just been—" "Stop," I finally found my voice. "Please, James, not in front of everyone." "Why not?" he asked. "You didn't seem concerned about our privacy when you were meeting him in public places where anyone could have seen you. You didn't think about our family when you were sending him pictures meant only for your husband's eyes." The screen now showed text messages I had sent Daniel, the intimate words I had written making me shrink in my seat. The dates on these texts corresponded with significant family events, one sent during Olivia's dance recital, another during James's birthday dinner. I couldn't bear to see any more. I stood up, knocking over my chair. "This is cruel, James. You've made your point." "Cruel?" he repeated, his eyes flashing with the first real anger he had shown. "What was cruel was watching you check your phone during our daughter's birthday party, smiling at messages from him while pretending to be present with us. What was cruel was lying awake, wondering if every business trip, every late meeting, every wedding emergency was just another opportunity for you to be with him." Our friends and family sat in stunned silence, unwilling participants in the public execution of our marriage. Rachel reached out to touch my arm, but withdrew her hand when I looked at her, as if my betrayal were contagious. "If anyone feels this is too uncomfortable and wants to leave, please feel free," James said to the room. This wasn't the anniversary celebration I originally planned, but I felt everyone deserved to know the truth. No one moved. The horrified fascination that keeps people staring at car wrecks held everyone in place. "There's one more thing," James said, tapping a key on the laptop. The screen changed to a video, security footage from the hotel hallway outside room 423, time-stamped from earlier that day. It showed James standing outside the door, keycard in hand, visibly steeling himself before using it to enter. "I wanted you all to see that I didn't barge in without warning," he explained. "I knocked 3 times. I gave her a chance to respond. And when I opened the door..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone could fill in the blank. If you've ever felt the sting of injustice when someone is caught in a lie, please like this video now. No one should have to experience what James did. The silence that followed James's presentation was deafening. I looked around the room, searching for a sympathetic face, finding none. Even my mother, who had always been my strongest supporter, couldn't meet my eyes. "You've all heard James's side," I finally said, my voice shaking. "Maybe you should hear mine before judging me." "This isn't about sides, Melissa," James replied. "These are facts, your own words, your own actions." "Facts without context," I countered, desperation making me bolder. "Our marriage hasn't been what it appeared to be for a long time." I turned to face our friends and family. "James shows you hotel receipts and text messages, but he doesn't show you the years of emotional neglect. The nights I spent alone while he worked late. The conversations that became nothing more than logistics about Olivia's schedule or household management." "So your solution was to cheat rather than talk to me?" James asked, his composure slipping slightly. "I tried talking to you." The words burst from me with unexpected force. 2 years ago, I told you I was unhappy, that I felt we were drifting apart. You suggested we get a new dining room table so we could have more family meals together, as if furniture could fix our problems. James's jaw tightened. "That's not what happened." "It is what happened," I insisted. "You treated our marriage like another project to be optimized. When I said I missed passion, you scheduled date nights in our shared calendar like business appointments." I looked at Rachel, my oldest friend. "Remember when I called you crying last Thanksgiving?" That was after James spent the entire holiday dinner on his phone handling a work crisis. When I confronted him, he said, "At least one of us is responsible." As if my work didn't matter. James shook his head. "You're rewriting history to justify your actions. I was on my phone because a client's accounts had been compromised. It was an actual emergency, not a convenient excuse to ignore my family. And that's always been the problem," I said. "Your priorities. Work first, then family obligations, with actual connection coming in a distant third." I turned to James's parents. "You raised a son who's excellent at providing financially, but who never learned how to be emotionally present. Did you know that before today, the last time James surprised me with anything was 5 years ago?" His father frowned. "Don't try to blame us for your poor choices, Melissa." "I'm not blaming anyone," I said, though of course I was. "I'm trying to explain that marriages don't break overnight. This didn't happen because I suddenly decided to throw away 12 years on a whim." James tapped the laptop keyboard, bringing up a new image, a family photo from Christmas, all 3 of us smiling in matching sweaters. "Is this what an unhappy family looks like?" he asked. "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what an unhappy family trying to keep up appearances looks like. Perfect on the outside, hollow on the inside." I pointed to the screen. "Do you know what happened 5 minutes after that photo was taken? You took a business call and spent the next hour in your office while Olivia and I opened presents without you." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across James's face. "That was an important client." "They're all important clients," I said. "That's the point." I looked around the table again, seeing some expressions soften slightly. I pressed my advantage, using the skills that had made me a successful wedding planner, reading a room, knowing what emotional notes to hit. What I did was wrong, I admitted. I should have either worked harder to fix our marriage or had the courage to end it cleanly. Having an affair was a mistake, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I've caused. James laughed without humor. "Are you auditioning for a role right now? Because this performance feels rehearsed." "It's not a performance to acknowledge my mistakes," I said. "Something you seem incapable of doing." I took a deep breath. Yes, I lied about where I was and who I was with. But James has been lying too, pretending our marriage was perfect when it was anything but. The difference is, my lies are on a slideshow for everyone to see, while his are still hidden behind that practiced smile. The difference, James said coldly, is that I kept my vows. His words hit me like a physical blow because they were irrefutably true. Whatever problems existed in our marriage, I had been the one to break our promises. "You're right," I conceded, "and I'll have to live with that. But don't pretend you're completely innocent in the breakdown of our relationship." I turned to our audience again. "James has shown you evidence of my betrayal over the past year. What he hasn't shown you is the evidence of our failing marriage over the past 5 years, because it's harder to document loneliness, harder to put emotional abandonment on a timeline." My father finally spoke up. "Melissa, enough. Stop trying to shift blame. What you did was wrong. Period." "I know it was wrong," I said, tears finally breaking through. "I know that. But I also know I didn't wake up one day and decide to ruin a happy marriage. We were broken long before Daniel came into the picture." "If we were so broken," James asked, "why didn't you just leave? Why the elaborate deception?" It was a fair question, one I had asked myself many times. "Because I was a coward," I admitted. "Because despite everything, I still loved parts of our life together. Because I didn't want to hurt Olivia or disappoint everyone in this room. Because I told myself that as long as you didn't know, no one was getting hurt." "But I was getting hurt," James said quietly. "Even before I knew for certain, I was feeling something was wrong. Wondering why my wife seemed happier coming home from work meetings than from spending time with me. Questioning why you always had your phone face down. Noticing how you pulled away when I touched you." His words made the room fall silent again. This time the silence felt different, less shocked, more contemplative. "I'm not asking anyone to forgive me," I said into the quiet. "What I did was inexcusable. But I am asking you to understand that affairs don't happen in a vacuum. They're often the symptom of a deeper problem, not the cause." James looked at me for a long moment. For a brief, hopeful second, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I bought this for our anniversary," he said, opening it to reveal a diamond eternity band. "I was going to surprise you with a vow renewal next month. I had already spoken to the officiant, booked the venue, started planning a second honeymoon. While you were planning meetings with your lover, I was planning to rebuild our marriage." The room collectively inhaled. My attempt at defense crumbled in the face of this new revelation. I stared at the ring, remembering the simple band he had placed on my finger 12 years ago in this very hotel, the promises we had made to each other. "James," I whispered, reaching for the box. "I didn't know." He snapped it shut before I could touch it. "No, you didn't." because you were too busy creating an escape to notice someone was trying to build you a home." With those words, any sympathy I had managed to cultivate in the room evaporated. James had delivered the final blow, not with anger or shouting, but with evidence of love and hope I had trampled without even knowing it existed. "I think we've all heard enough," James's mother said, standing up. "James, dear, we'll take Olivia for as long as you need." One by one, our friends and family began to rise, murmuring awkward goodbyes. Some hugged James. No one approached me. The public trial was over, and the verdict was unanimous. I remained seated as the room emptied, the untouched anniversary dinner growing cold on the table, the evidence of my betrayal still displayed on the screen behind me. I had tried to defend myself, to contextualize my actions, but in the end, there was no defense strong enough to justify what I had done. James stayed until the last guest had left. Then he turned to me, his face showing exhaustion rather than anger. "I'll be staying at Ryan's tonight. You can go home to pack your things. I'd like you out by tomorrow evening." "What about Olivia?" I asked, my voice small. "We'll need to talk about that," he replied, "but not tonight." "Tonight, I think we've said enough." He walked toward the door, then paused. "You know what hurts the most, Melissa? It's not the affair. It's that you were planning to sit across from me at dinner tonight, look me in the eyes, and wish me happy anniversary after spending the afternoon with him. How many times did you do that? Come home to me with him still on your skin?" I had no answer. No defense left to offer. As James walked out of the private dining room, I sat alone with the wreckage of my choices spread out around me, understanding for the first time the true magnitude of what I had destroyed. The days following the anniversary dinner passed in a blur of shame and consequences. I moved into a small apartment downtown, taking only personal belongings and leaving behind the life we had built together. James arranged for me to see Olivia on weekends, supervised visits that felt like a cruel reminder of my new status as the family villain. A week after I moved out, James asked to meet me at a coffee shop near his office. I arrived early, rehearsing what I would say, clinging to the hope that enough time had passed for him to consider reconciliation. James arrived precisely on time, looking tired but composed. He set a manila folder on the table between us. "What's this?" I asked. "Divorce papers," he replied. "My lawyer drew them up. I'm hoping we can keep this civil for Olivia's sake." "James, please," I said, not touching the folder. "Can't we at least try counseling? People recover from affairs. Marriages heal." He shook his head. "This isn't just about the affair anymore. It's about trust. I'll never be able to believe anything you say again. That's not fair. I made a terrible mistake, but it doesn't erase 12 years together, our family, our history." "You're right about one thing," James said. "It was a mistake. But it wasn't one mistake. It was hundreds of deliberate choices, day after day, for almost a year." I had no response to that undeniable truth. "There's something else you should know," James continued. "After the anniversary dinner, Daniel came to see me." My heart stuttered. "What? Why?" "To apologize, apparently, and to give me these." James reached into the folder and pulled out printed emails. Dozens of them. Exchanges between Daniel and me going back to the very beginning of our affair. He kept everything, Melissa. Every message, every photo, every detailed account of our marriage problems that you shared with him. He said he felt guilty after seeing the fallout and wanted to do the right thing. I felt physically ill. He had no right to do that. Actually, I think he had every right. He was part of this too. And unlike you, he seems to have developed a conscience. James pushed one particular email across the table. I recognized it immediately. A long message I had sent Daniel after a fight with James about Olivia's school activities. "You told him I was a cold, absent father who cared more about spreadsheets than his own daughter," James quoted, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "You told him our marriage was effectively over, and you were just waiting for the right time to leave. Was any of that true?" Or was it just something you said to justify sleeping with him? I stared at the printed words. My own cruelty reflected back at me. I was angry when I wrote that. We had been fighting. We had disagreed about which summer camp to send Olivia to. James corrected. A normal parenting discussion that you apparently transformed into evidence of our failed marriage to share with your lover. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too public for this conversation. People at nearby tables were beginning to notice our intensity. James, can we talk about this somewhere private? No, he said firmly. I'm done with secrets. Daniel also shared something else interesting. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. He recorded your last conversation with him, the one after I caught you together. My blood ran cold. He recorded me without my knowledge? That's illegal in Oregon without both parties' consent? Yes, it is. Just like adultery used to be. But legal issues aside, I think you'll find it enlightening. James pressed play, and my own voice filled the space between us, thin and desperate. James doesn't matter anymore. This was always going to happen eventually. Once things calm down, once the divorce is settled, we can be together properly. This might actually be for the best, forcing the issue instead of me trying to find the right time to leave him. I lunged for the phone, but James pulled it back. There's more. Daniel's voice responded. Melissa, I think we need to be realistic here. This was never going to be a long-term thing. You know that, right? I'm moving to Chicago next month for that job I told you about. I thought you understood this was just fun. My recorded voice turned brittle. You can't be serious. After everything I've risked for you? After what just happened? I'm sorry, Daniel's voice continued. But I never promised you anything beyond what we had. I never talked about leaving my life for you. Turn it off, I whispered, tears burning my eyes. Please. James obliged, silencing the damning evidence of my complete humiliation. He sent me the full recording. It gets worse. You begged him to stay. You offered to leave Portland, to follow him to Chicago. You told him you loved him. Did you ever actually plan to leave me, Melissa? Or was Daniel just a convenient escape who never had to live up to the reality of daily life? I couldn't answer. The truth was, I didn't know myself. My affair with Daniel had existed in a fantasy world of stolen moments and heightened emotions. I had never truly confronted what it would mean to leave my marriage for him, to build a real life together rather than just exciting interludes. The irony, James said, is that Daniel dumped you for the exact same reason you cheated on me. The excitement wore off. The novelty faded. He found a better opportunity. Sound familiar? His words cut through my defenses with surgical precision. The parallels were undeniable, and the realization made me physically sick. I truly am sorry, I said, the words feeling wholly inadequate. Not just for getting caught, but for everything. For hurting you. For risking our family. For the lies. James nodded slowly. I believe you're sorry now. But it's too late. Not just because of the affair, but because of what I learned about who you really are. The Melissa I thought I married would never have been capable of this level of deception. He pushed the divorce papers toward me again. I'm not trying to punish you. The terms are fair. Joint custody with primary residence with me. Division of assets according to state guidelines. I don't want a drawn-out legal battle that would only hurt Olivia more. I looked down at the papers, the legal language that would formally end our marriage. Did you ever really love me? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. I loved you completely, James replied without hesitation. Right up until I realized the person I loved never actually existed. Those words, the absolute conviction with which he delivered them, shattered any remaining hope I had of reconciliation. The finality struck me with physical force. What would you have done? James asked suddenly, his voice softer. If our positions were reversed, if you had discovered I was having a year-long affair, systematically lying to your face every day, sharing intimate details of our marriage with another woman? What would you have done? It was a question that deserved honest reflection. If you're watching this now, I ask you the same question. What would you have done in James's position? Would you have forgiven? Sought revenge? Walked away? Comment below with what you think you would have done if you were in my husband's shoes. After a long moment, I answered truthfully. I would have done exactly what you're doing. I wouldn't have been as controlled or as fair. I probably would have burned everything to the ground. James nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. I almost did. For weeks, I fantasized about more public ways to expose you. I considered sending the evidence to your clients, posting it online, destroying your business the way you destroyed our marriage. But that wouldn't have helped Olivia. And in the end, that's all that matters now. Protecting her from the fallout of your choices. He stood, gathering the emails but leaving the divorce papers. My lawyer's contact information is on the first page. Have your attorney reach out when you've reviewed everything. As he turned to leave, I called after him. James, wait. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all that would make a difference? He paused, considering the question with the thoughtfulness that had once been one of the things I loved most about him. No, he said finally. Some broken things can't be fixed. Sometimes all you can do is acknowledge the damage and move on. With that, he walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me alone with the legal document that would formalize the end of our marriage. A marriage that had died long before I realized it. Killed not by one dramatic betrayal, but by 1,000 small deceptions, each one another nail in the coffin I had built with my own hands. 6 months after the anniversary dinner that exposed my double life, the divorce was finalized. I moved into a smaller apartment across town and started over with a new wedding planning business under my maiden name. My previous company had collapsed when former clients learned of the scandal. Apparently, women planning their weddings preferred not to hire a known adulteress. James sold our family home, unable to live with the memories it contained. He and Olivia moved to a downtown condo with views of the river. Our daughter split her time between us, though she remained wary in my presence, old enough at 9 years old to understand something of what had happened, but too young to comprehend the complexities of adult relationships. "Why did you hurt Daddy?" she asked me once during a weekend visit. "Didn't you love us anymore?" I had prepared for this question, working with a therapist to find age-appropriate words that wouldn't burden her with adult problems. "I made a very big mistake," I told her. "I loved you and Daddy very much, but I made choices that hurt people I cared about. I'm working hard to be better." She accepted this with the simple forgiveness of childhood, though I knew harder questions would come as she grew older. I dreaded the day she would learn the full story, when she would look at me with the same disappointment I had seen in the eyes of our friends and family. The social fallout was perhaps the most difficult adjustment. Friends took sides, most aligning with James. My parents maintained a strained relationship with me, unable to fully reconcile their daughter with the person who had behaved so callously. James's family cut contact entirely, except for necessary communications regarding Olivia. Daniel moved to Chicago as planned. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was engaged to someone new within a year. The news stung more than it should have, considering how little he had actually meant to me in the end. He had been an escape, not a destination, a fact I realized too late. 11 months after our separation, I ran into James at Olivia's school play. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, attractive, age-appropriate, with a kind smile that reached her eyes when she looked at him. They weren't overtly affectionate, but I recognized the subtle signs of a new relationship. The casual way their shoulders touched, the private smiles they exchanged during the performance. I approached them afterward, Olivia having gone backstage to change out of her costume. "She was wonderful," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You must be proud." "We are," James replied, then hesitated before introducing his companion. "Melissa, this is Claire. Claire, this is Olivia's mother." Not my ex-wife, but Olivia's mother. A subtle but significant demotion in my identity. Claire shook my hand with genuine warmth, either unaware of our history or gracious enough to set it aside. Olivia was amazing, she said. She has so much confidence on stage. Yes, I agreed, searching for signs of resentment in her eyes and finding none. She always has. An awkward silence fell. James broke it with practiced ease. We should go backstage to congratulate her. Good to see you, Melissa. As they walked away, I noticed how relaxed James seemed. Happier, lighter than he had been in our final years together. The realization was bittersweet. Part of me was glad to see him healing. Another part mourned what could have been if I had made different choices. 2 weeks later, I received a text from James asking to meet. We arranged to talk at a park near his new home, neutral territory where we could speak privately. I wanted you to hear this from me, he said, as we sat on a bench overlooking the river. I've asked Claire to marry me. She said yes. The news wasn't unexpected, but it still knocked the wind from me. I'm happy for you, I managed to say. I'm telling you because it will affect Olivia, of course. Claire and I are planning to wait a year before the wedding, give everyone time to adjust. She's good with Olivia, respectful of boundaries. Unlike me, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. James sighed. This isn't about punishing you, Melissa. It's about moving forward. Claire isn't trying to replace you as Olivia's mother. We all need to co-parent effectively. I nodded, fighting back tears. I know. And I'm genuinely glad you found someone. Olivia needs stability. So do I, he said simply. We discussed logistics, holidays, school events, how to handle the transition. James was practical as always, focused on solutions rather than emotions. As we finished our conversation, I gathered my courage to ask the question that had haunted me for months. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? James was quiet for a long moment, watching the river flow past. I already have, he said finally. Not for your sake, but for mine. I couldn't move forward carrying that weight. But you'll never trust me again. No, he agreed. Some things, once broken, stay broken. That's the reality we have to accept. As he stood to leave, he reached into his pocket and handed me a small object, the key to our old house. I found this when I was moving some boxes. Thought you might want it as a reminder. A reminder of what I lost? I asked, the metal cold against my palm. A reminder that every choice has consequences. Some temporary, some permanent. He looked at me directly, his eyes clear and certain. You turned our anniversary into a memorial for our marriage. Now we both have to live with that. With those words, he walked away, leaving me alone with the key to a home that no longer existed, a symbol of all I had thrown away in pursuit of an illusion. I sat on that bench long after he disappeared from view, watching families walk past, parents holding hands, children laughing, ordinary moments of connection that I had taken for granted. In the end, there was no dramatic reconciliation, no last-minute reprieve from the consequences of my actions. James found happiness with someone new. I learned to live with the reality I had created. Olivia grew up shuttling between two homes instead of thriving in one. The affair that had seemed so exciting, so justified in the moment, revealed itself as the hollow escape it always was. Not a path to happiness, but a detour into destruction. The thrill faded quickly. The damage remained permanent. As I finally stood to leave the park, I dropped the old house key into the river, watching it disappear beneath the surface. Some chapters can't be reopened. Some mistakes can't be unmade. Some endings, once written, remain forever closed.